Okay, so we've got a couple of people. I'm sure other people will keep rolling in. But anyways, I'm Sarah, and this is the author panel for TJ Klune. TJ Klune is a is an ex-claims examiner for an insurance company. His novels include the Green Creek series, House in the Cerulean Sea, which I believe is almost the latest one, except for and The Extraordinaries, which the sequel is coming out to that in a couple of weeks, I believe, which is a YA series that I'm really excited about because I do the YA buying at the library where I work. Anyways, so we're going to get started with gathering questions to ask TJ when he comes in. And if anyone has anything that they thought of that they'd like to ask, I will be taking names down and basically what your question is, and then we'll be calling on you in order. Does anyone have any questions that they brought that they'd like to start out with taking down? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to, if you have a question that you would like to have asked. Okay. So I guess we'll let you guys think about if there's any questions you would like to ask TJ. We'll just talk about some of his books for a little bit in case people aren't familiar. The one that I started out with that came out last year was the House in the Cerulean Sea, which I really enjoyed, which is about a character named Linus Baker, who is a caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth, who's tasked with determining whether 6 dangerous magical children are likely to bring about the end of the world. And it turns out to be very charming and more comforting than I thought it was going to be. Not that I thought it was going to be ominous or anything, but I've heard a lot of people describe it as like a really good found family vibes and just very comforting and very pleasant to read. I'm working on reading some of his back catalog now. Like I said, there's also a YA book that he's written that the sequel comes out to next week called The Extraordinaries. It's about it's a queer coming of age story about a fanboy with ADHD and the heroes he loves. He doesn't have powers himself, but he's the most popular fan fiction writer in the Extraordinaries fandom. And after a chance encounter with Shadowstar, Nova City's mightiest hero and Nick's biggest crush, Nick sets out to make himself extraordinary, and he'll do it with or without the reluctant help of Seth Grey, his best friend, and maybe the love of his life. So lots of good superhero vibes and fan fiction and hopeless, useless crushes, which I haven't started that one yet, but it does look very good and I would like to try it. Has anyone here read any of TJ's books or maybe just curious?
I've read House in the Cerulean Sea and I really loved it. I'm a teacher, so it really spoke to me how he wrote the kids. Mm-hmm. I thought that it was really great.
Yeah, no, it was a terrific book. I'm really excited to get into the other ones that he's written. Has anyone else read House in the Cerulean Sea? Or maybe some of the back catalog?
I have heard of it, but I don't know where to get it.
Well, depending on which library is closest to you, they probably have it. If not, I got the audiobook version through Audible myself. But like I said, most libraries around should be able to at least put you on the wait list. I know at our library, it's had a wait list of at least a few people for a year now, which is pretty impressive.
By the way, it's lovely to see you. I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be a person, not you. Another person, I mean.
Yeah, no, don't tell everyone I'm secretly a lizard in a skin suit. But no, it's lovely to hear all of your voices too. Has anyone thought of any questions about the books or just, writing in general that they'd like to ask? No? Okay. Let's see. Other books. Oh, so anyways, the sequel to The Extraordinaries is called Flash Fire. And I didn't take down the exact date it comes out, but it's definitely the second full week in July. I want to say the 13th, but I'm not sure. But it looks really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. Oh, and there's also a book coming out, I believe, September 21st, called Under the Whispering Door that I'm really excited about. It's a reaper that collects a person from his own funeral. But instead of taking him directly to the afterlife, he gets taken to a small village that like in the after. Yeah. Anyways, and there's a tea shop run by a man named Hugo. And Hugo is the tea shop's, he owns the tea shop and interacts with the ferryman and acts as the ferryman to souls who need to cross over. Sorry, words are a thing. Anyways, but Wallace, the character who is collected from his funeral, isn't ready to be dead, and starts to learn about all the things he missed in life with Hugo's help. And then the manager, curious and powerful being, arrives at the tea shop and gives Wallace 1 week to cross over. And Wallace sets about living a lifetime in 7 days, which says that it's going to be heartwarming and heartbreaking, which I absolutely believe given what I know of his other books, but I'm really excited about that. That comes out at the end of September. So yeah. Anyways. And I'm also, the book that I'm working on of his next is Murmuration, which is about a small weird town where things definitely aren't right. But one of the characters starts to realize that, long story short. I don't know if anyone's read that one. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you, Samantha. I will write that down. Okay. All right, well, it's been a few minutes, so I don't know if people are still coming in or not, but if anyone hasn't thought of any questions that they want to ask TJ, please announce them now. If not, we'll probably have him come in a minute. Okay. All right, well, anyways, like I said, if you missed it at the beginning of the panel, TJ Klune is a Lambda literary award-winning author and an ex-claims examiner for an insurance company. His novels include the Green Creek series, The House in the Cerulean Sea, and The Extraordinaries, as well as, I know another popular one is the Tales from Verania series, starting with The Lightning Struck Heart, which our library just got in Waterville. And other ones, like I said, Under the Whispering Door comes out in September, and Flashfire comes out second week in July if you're into superheroes. TJ, I guess if you want to turn your camera back on and come in now. Hello, thank you for joining. Sorry again about the time mix-up, but we're really excited to talk
totally
to you
okay.
today.
I get it. It happens. I'm
yeah.
not worried.
Yeah, no, and Julie said you were coming to be a guest. I personally was very, very excited because, like I said, a couple months ago, I found The House in the Cerulean Sea, and then I've been working on other books from there, but that was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I heard you guys brought up Tales from Verania, and I'm going to flat out say right now that that is not a book for children. That is a book for adults in an adult audience. So make sure that you are not reading the description of that book and going, "Oh, this sounds wholesome," because it's not. I don't want any children to be corrupted by their parents handing them that book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I promise no one, at least at our library, will be giving it to their kids because it
That's
has a
good.
unicorn in it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that
Um,
was my big concern when House in the Cerulean Sea came out and blew up. I was like, oh man, people are going to go through my back catalog expecting the same wholesome, cheerful kind of stuff, and they're going to
yeah.
be sorely disappointed.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That one seems to have a lot of delightfully absurd comedy and shall we say adult humor, but
Yes,
in a way that I'm
exactly.
really looking forward to personally.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
the sixth book in that series comes out April of next year, so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll have to make sure we get that one too. Yeah, no, I'm every time I think I've found all of your books, I find another one that I want to read. So that will usually be for a while.
Yeah, that when the House of the Cerulean Sea came out in March of last year, that was my 25th novel that I've published since
Wow.
I started in 2011. Actually, this August will be my 10th year anniversary of publishing.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, that's so many books. I know
So many books.
I bought the I do the purchasing for the young adult section at my library. So I got the extraordinaries last year, and then I saw the announcement for Flashfire, and I was like, wait a minute, I just got the first one.
Yeah, it comes out in 2 weeks, in July 13th.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Yeah, no, the pandemic ate my brain a little bit with reading, but I definitely want to get to that one soon because it looks really good. And it's done pretty well. It's probably people are checking it out. They like it.
That's always good to know. Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
first foray into YA, and it's been a kind of a trip writing for a different kind of an audience.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed, not to get too library about this, but another library in our system had Into This River I Drown, and they put that in the YA section. I'm not sure if it's
No, yeah, no, that book
Be there.
is a very hardcore look at grief, and that is
Yeah.
definitely not YA. Just be given the subject matter, and I'm really proud of that book. That was the book that
Yeah.
won me the Lambda Literary Award. But
Oh, cool.
most of the books that I've written are not geared toward young adults.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes mistakes are made. But
It happens. It's totally fine.
looking forward to reading it. But yeah. So so it's been a little quiet so far, but Samantha was wondering where your inspiration comes from because I know your books have a lot of variety in terms of, well, tone and a little bit in genre and setting.
Yeah, so I have ADHD, and that kind of makes me, as one might expect, hop all over the place. And God love the authors who can write in the same subgenre over and over and over again, or hell, even in the same series over and over and over again, because I can't do that because my brain just won't allow me to, and B, I'll get bored. And if I get bored, that's going to show in my writing, and my readers will be able to pick up that I'm bored with what I'm writing about. So I tend to hop all over the place I started out, my first book way back in 2011 was contemporary. My second book was a science fiction weird mashup thing. And I tend to bounce around from genre to genre, but I will say that as of the last few years, I have found a home in fantasy, because that is I think where I'm happiest in terms of my writing. The House in the Cerulean Sea, The Extraordinaries, which both came out last year, and then this year I have the sequel to The Extraordinaries, Flashfire, and then Under the Whispering Door, which comes out in September. Those are both fantasies. And then 2022 is all fantasy with my publisher Tor. And I'm very happy being in the fantasy space at the moment, especially being able to make it queer and carving a space out for queer voices. Not only are queer voices important in fantasy, but all marginalized voices are, and I say that as a cis white dude, but it's important that we continue to lift up marginalized voices. And I know that librarians have been quite excellent at doing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, we try. I didn't know a lot going into House in the Cerulean Sea. So I was really pleased to find out that it was a queer story, and then even more pleased to find out that they all are.
Mhm.
So, which is absolutely great.
Yeah, that's always going to be a through line through my books. They're always going
Yeah,
to be about queer people and queer families and coming together to overcome whatever obstacles in their way. But every book I write, from every book I've written to every book I write in the future, is going to be about queer people.
yeah, that's excellent. That's so great. Yeah, there's not, I know, well, maybe just in terms of like what's being highlighted, but what I'm finding is that, the YA books and sections at what's available at libraries is increasingly more diverse, but the adult section is a little more of a struggle. So I really appreciate it when I can find a lot of really good books that do highlight queer experiences and different types of relationships and family.
Yeah, YA has always been at the forefront of diversity, but I've been noticing in the last couple of years an increasing divide as in terms of YA getting much farther ahead than adult literature, and it's frankly it's kind of disappointing
Mhm.
to still see that. It seems kind of weird to say, but in 2021, it can still be hard to find adult queer literature where the queer
Right,
characters are front and center and they get a happy ending, that it's not about queer trauma. I
right.
mean, there's a time and place for books like that, and I'm sure there are some really great books like that, but
Mhm.
I don't want to celebrate or push forward queer trauma. I want to
Right.
celebrate the characters, celebrate their queerness, and show that their queerness is not the only thing that defines them, that it's just a part of their whole,
Mhm.
and that they can still get a happy ending just like everybody else gets. And I
Yeah.
think it's important that we continue to push that, especially in the adult market.
Right, right. And to do that and not have stories that are necessarily, just coming out again and again and again and again, stories about queer characters who get to just exist and possibly be happy and do nice things. And personally, I'm always a good sucker for a good found family story.
Well, found family is my jam. That is my favorite thing to write, and as evidenced by how many times I've written that particular trope into my books. But House in the Cerulean Sea, The Extraordinaries, this year Flashfire continues that, and then Under the Whispering Door is an adult queer book, not in terms of subject matter, just for the fact that it's adult in the way that The House in the Cerulean Sea was adult.
Right.
It was just how it was marketed. But uh, they are all about found families, because it's something that we need to be talking about more and more too, just given the fact that queer people, the reason that we are so drawn to found families is that's what a lot of our families are made up of, because
Mhm.
we don't get the benefit of the doubt a lot of times from our families who are related to us by blood because of who we are. And so we have to go search elsewhere for that kind of familial connection.
Right, right. Lorraine wants to know, as the mother of a child with ADHD, I know creative, how do you keep focused and inspired with your work? Because brains tend to.
Right. So ADHD is not something that can ever be cured. It's not, and it's not something that necessarily needs to be cured. A kid with ADHD becomes a teenager with ADHD who becomes an adult with ADHD.
Mhm.
And while I won't say my ADHD has lessened, it's gotten easier for me to manage because of a combination of medical professional help, pharmaceuticals that help keep me on the level. And I am very, very strict when it comes to my time. I write full time. This is my full time job. I quit my soul sucking cubicle job back in 2016 and have been writing full time ever since. And I made a promise to myself when I did that if I was going to do it, that I needed to actually do it and not slack off. Because when you think about it, when you leave your job that you worked 50, 60 hours a week, and then all of a sudden you're at home every day, all day, it can be
Right.
very easy to slip into some really bad habits, such as
Yeah.
not getting up early or not
Mhm.
putting on real clothes all day, every day, just wearing pajamas. But the very first, I quit my job on a Friday, and that Monday morning, I woke up at the same time I normally did, which is 5 a.m. And I get up and I am writing from about 6 a.m. to about noon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that is my focus. That is my job. I treat it as my job. And with me, I tend to hyper focus on things. That's how my ADHD works. And so when I'm focused on my writing, everything else is gone. So I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not moving around. I love writing. It's always been the best medicine for me. It's always been my safe space, my haven. And so when I'm writing, I'm not focused on anything else, and I'm just focusing on the story itself. And then the rest of my time is usually spent working on the billions of emails I receive every single day.
Oh yeah, I'm sure those never stop, working in publishing.
Yeah, no, it's a trip, but I do have to say that my publicists, they, for all I complain, they get a billion more emails than I do. So
Yeah, helps sort of filter
and
through.
half of them are from me asking questions that I should have known the answer to from the previous email.
Yeah, well, that happens. So like we discussed, you have a lot of novels, which I'm really excited about getting to know more about as I go on. But what's your, I know this is like asking to pick a child, but like what's your favorite out of them that maybe isn't as appreciated as the some, or
Oh yeah,
others,
easy.
or
It's
just
easy for me. It's called How to Be a Normal Person.
uh-huh.
It is a contemporary book about a man who is coded to be read as a person with autism, and his name is Gus. And he works in a video store in the small town that he lives in, and his life is ordered, and it is every second of his day is planned. And then a new guy moves into town and starts working at the coffee shop next door and upends his entire world. And Gus decides he wants to try to be a normal person to fit in with this person, obviously not realizing that this new guy, Casey, will love him no matter who he is. And it is a happy story. Like The House in the Cerulean Sea, it is a happy book about discovering yourself and finding your place in the world. And that book came out in 2015, and to this day, it still remains my favorite thing I've written. Just because it was the first time that I put the topic of asexuality in one of my books.
Oh, cool.
I'm asexual, so I wanted to put a character in a book that I could identify with, because at the time in 2015, there wasn't a whole lot of books with asexual characters. It's gotten a lot better at that, particularly in YA. But I wanted to write a book that wasn't focused on sex. It was focused on the connection between two people and what kind of a romance could blossom from that. And it just makes me happy. That book makes me happy. And I've heard from so many people all over the world who, when they discovered that book, it gives them a feeling of happiness. It brings them a feeling of joy. And it's a celebration. It's a queer celebration. And I love those kinds of books.
Yeah, no, that does sound like a very happy story. I'll definitely have to put that on my list. I saw it in my travels. I didn't realize it had asexuality rep in it too, but that's excellent, because I really don't see a lot of that in adult fiction. So that's wonderful.
We get to see more and more of that in YA, but unfortunately in adult fiction, I've come across too many things where it's obvious the author's intentions were not followed through, because they don't really seem to understand what asexuality is.
Right.
And I've read a few books where it seemed that the asexuality needed to be cured. They just needed to find the right person. And that makes me shudder when something like that happens. That makes me irrationally angry, because that's not how it works. It's like ADHD. I don't need to be cured of it because there's nothing wrong with me.
Right, exactly. No, that's really annoying when they play it like that. See, okay. Very, very important question. I can't remember her name, but the cat in The House in the Cerulean Sea, is she based off of a real cat?
Yeah, she's based off of my cat, Otter.
Oh.
Yeah, Calliope in The House in the Cerulean
Yes, that was
Sea.
it.
Yes. My cat, I got her in 2008 because my sister found a feral cat outside of her house, and that feral cat had kittens, and my sister was able to give all the kittens away except for one, which was apparently the meanest one. And so she goes, she reminds me of you, so here. And so she gave me this cat who is currently sitting on my desk across the room staring at me right now. But yes, Calliope is based off my cat Otter. And I have some battle scars from my cat. But she's my old lady now, and I adore her to pieces.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I loved Calliope in the book. The attitude was absolutely on point. And yeah, no, you always find the most interesting cats in the most interesting ways. She sounds like yours sounds like a delight. Battle scars aside.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's it's when I first got her, she was just this tiny little thing, but man, was she loud, and man, did she not want to be touched. And I still have scars on my fingers to prove that. But she's chilled out as she's gotten older, and now she just hates everybody except for me. So it's totally good.
Oh, that's such a high compliment from a cat.
Yeah, I think so too. I'd rather have that be that way than have her hate me too and stalk me in the night when I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah, no, at least she'll let you live. So I think this was in regards to the asexuality in fiction. Ashley was wondering why it might be like what's published in adult still, in terms of like doing it in a way that they think the character needs to be fixed, or just not doing it very well. Like, is it just ignorance, or might be about what sells?
I think ignorance is the biggest part of it. I think that especially with publishers that might not even know. Look, now these days in YA particularly, you have something that are known as sensitivity readers, which are extraordinarily important, especially for I'll get to what it means in a minute, but especially for someone like myself, a white dude who writes, say, characters of color. It is so important for me to get sensitivity readers who belong to whatever group I'm writing about, to make sure that I get it right, to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong, that I don't have any unintentional biases, that I don't have blinders on because of my privilege. And sensitivity readers are the unsung heroes of the publishing industry, because they go in and they read your manuscript and they say, hey, this is what you got right, this is what you got wrong. They're not there to tear the story apart, but they are there to hold the author accountable for what they're writing. And to that end, you would think if a writer who doesn't identify as ace is writing asexual characters, that they would get an asexual sensitivity reader. But I don't know if that's even the case, that they do that now, because I still think that the idea of being asexual is still something that's so wild for some people to grasp that it's not even under consideration. Like it's only been in the last few years that it belongs in the LGBTQ plus category, that people see A and they still think it means ally, but it doesn't. It means asexual.
Right.
And it's to people who we are as we grow, we are inundated with the idea of sex, and that is something that happens to everyone as you get older. But there are a large group of people that just are either A, sex repulsed, or B, just don't feel anything when it comes to sex, that it can be very uncomfortable for us to have to go through all of that kind of same kind of programming when it comes to how you're going to be when you get older. And I don't know. I think that we just need more of that kind of representation in books. Next year, I have a queer retelling of Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio that comes out, and the main character in that is asexual, and that is being published by my big Tor Macmillan publisher. So I'm very excited to be able to put more asexual stories out there.
Wow, yeah, no, that sounds really good. I'll have to keep an eye out for that one. Taryn wants to know, they say it almost feels like YA is the space where marginalized people flock to. Do you think that has anything to do with wanting to provide the next generation of queer / marginalized, etc. folks with representation we didn't have? Is that something you feel / hope The Extraordinaries does?
Yeah, so I saw this thing online a few weeks ago that talked about why, and I'm going to focus on queer men. Why so many queer men go hog wild in their 20s while they have lots of sex, while they go to parties, while they get drunk, do drugs, and go to bars and all that kind of stuff. And it's very true. It's very pointed. There's a reason for that. Is we don't get, for a lot of us, we didn't get to have the same experience that our peers did in our teen years. We didn't get to have the joy of taking someone that we wanted to prom, because we might not be out, or our schools might not let us. We don't get to go to sex ed and hear them talk about queer sex. We have to listen to them talk about sexual education as it pertains to heterosexual people. And that's still something that's very true today in 2021. Right now, there is no widespread or uniform queer sex ed class in the United States that queer kids are able to participate in. And so when we hit our 20s, we have all this pent up energy that other people our age were able to work through in their teens, and we don't get to do that then, so we have to do it later. And there's a reason that we are flocking to YA and queer voices. I still like to think of myself as an adult author who dabbles in YA, but YA for me is, I think about how I was when I was 15, 16 years old. The very first book I read with queer characters in it was a book that I adored because I got to know the author when I got older, which is The Front Runner by Patricia Nell Warren. And if you've never heard of that book, Patricia Nell Warren was a straight white woman. And in the 70s, she wrote The Front Runner about a coach and one of his athletes who he's training for the Olympic team. And it was a national bestseller, but it was also very scandalous because it was very frank in its talk about sex and sexuality. The issue, though, and I'm sorry that I'm spoiling a 40, 50-year-old book, but the issue, though, is that the queer characters suffer tremendously throughout the series, to the point of where one of the queer characters in this couple is murdered at the end of the book. And that was my first experience with queer people in a book. Was seeing how they were murdered. And this was the late 90s. I was 16 in 1997. So and I lived in rural Oregon in a very poor area. And so imagine being the loudmouth, slightly effeminate kid with ADHD in a rural area who is queer and who doesn't get to see himself in anything. And then you find a book with queer people, and all of a sudden the queer people are dead. So it stuck with me. It stuck with me so much so that when I got older, I made a promise to myself that if I was going to write, that any time that I wrote any book that I wrote about queer people, the queer people would get happy endings. Maybe they would need a bumpy road to get there. Maybe shit will happen and bad stuff could happen. But at the end of the day, at the end of the story, the queer people will get a happy ending in the books that I write. And especially in YA, because I know for a fact that there are queer kids out there who are neurodiverse, who have ADHD, who don't get to see themselves in fiction. So I want to show themselves, this is what you are, this is what I am, this is what we look like, and together we are so much stronger than people give us credit for. So I wrote The Extraordinaries in YA to make the little queer boy out there with ADHD, the comic book nerds who wish they could see themselves in comics and stuff like that. That's who I wrote The Extraordinaries for. The book is for anyone who wants to read it, but I wrote it with that specific cross-section of people in mind, because they deserve to have their stories told too.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah, no, I hope the adult market also continues to expand in diversity and offerings and happy stories with queer people. I am also really happy about how diverse YA is, because of all the kids who will get to see themselves in fiction that they couldn't before. I remember just 5-10 years ago, it wasn't really as much like this in YA, at least not the ones that I personally was finding in my area. So I'm just, it's great that people can see themselves in their experiences in happy stories, and with an ever widening array of genders and sexualities and
race, color, creed, all of that. And it's important that we remember that, you know, I don't want to, I'm not going to speak for all marginalized voices because, you know, I can't equate myself to what a person of color goes through because
Right.
that's not the same. But at the same time, we need to lift up all marginalized voices to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, because it wasn't that long ago that science fiction and fantasy was a straight white male game. It
Right.
was straight white guys writing science fiction and fantasy. And then you had a bunch of badass women who came through and said, no, we're going to make a space for ourselves too. And, you know, there was some pushback, but while it is getting better, you know, YA again is at the forefront of it, but in science fiction and fantasy and the adult market especially, we still have a ways to go before we are even remotely approaching where YA is at this point.
Yeah. 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 And I know, and part of this struggle with libraries is that some librarians are worried that, well, and other people too, that just because a book is diverse, it might, and the characters are a little young, it might get put in the YA section when it doesn't belong there. But that's a thing to be worked on and continually. But
yeah, one of my favorite books
less.
of all time is A Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. And that is a book that is, the narrator is a 12-year-old boy in that book, but that book is most certainly not young adult. It is adult fiction, and it is it shows as much through the narrative. And if you haven't read that book, I recommend that everybody read it. It's one of the best books I've ever read.
Okay, other questions? So this might be a little, with all the characters you have, it might be a little too broad, but is there, like, if you had to pick a character, like a side character from one of your novels to do a spin-off story about, is there anyone that you would want to get into their head a little more than you were able to in the
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to go to the House in the Cerulean Sea. Chauncey, the little boy blob with the dreams of being a bellhop, is one of my favorite characters out of any book I've written. And he's my favorite character in the House in the Cerulean Sea. And I just adore him to pieces. It's not saying that I don't love the other kids, because I do, but Chauncey is my boy. He is my jam. He, his innocence and his desire, his uniquely pointed desire to want to be a bellhop, is just something such a kid would do. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be, after I watched Indiana Jones, I got a super huge crush on Indiana Jones at the age of like 11. And so I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist. Mm-hmm. And then I saw the movie Aliens, and then I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist astronaut. And that became like a singular focus of mine, even though it's absolutely ridiculous. But I was 11, 12 years old. You couldn't have told me that that's ridiculous, because that's what I wanted to be. Right. So with that conviction, I just remember Chauncey, how he wants to be a bellhop so bad. And it's something so innocuous and something so, you know, simple, but to him, it's all he wants. And you go through the novel knowing that people are afraid of him because of how he looks, and that might not ever get to be his reality. Yeah. But he gets to do that by the end. And that makes me, I don't know. I would love to be able to see what that looks like for him, his continuing adventures of that. Like, not even like a full-fledged novel. It could almost be like an illustrated book, like a picture book almost, about Chauncey going to all. Now I'm getting ideas.
No, that would be an absolutely adorable picture book or graphic novel of Chauncey getting to live out his dream of being a bellhop. I'd absolutely read that.
I could definitely do that. Yeah. But I think about all those kids all the time in that book and what they're up to now. And I have some ideas about continuing on in that world, but I'm just kind of playing it by ear right now, letting it settle for a while.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. If you do decide to go back to the world, I would also, I'm sure a lot of people are really interested to see, you know, where the kids end up next, because they're also interesting in their own ways, and the ways that they interact with each other. But yeah, absolutely. Because it just came out, and there are so many books and ideas.
Yeah, I have so many books already coming out now that are already scheduled. I'm booked through 2024 now. So
that's exciting though.
It is. It's very exciting. It's definitely not complaining, but you know, every now and then I just realize that, oh man, I'm kind of doing this, huh?
Yeah, no, you're really doing it. That's great though. Is there anything that's like especially surprising that you didn't expect to learn that you did now that you've started, creating books full time?
Um,
I noticed.
so I was with an indie publisher before I got called up to the big leagues with The Extraordinaries and The House in the Cerulean Sea. And there is I'm not going to disparage or besmirch my prior publisher. That's a whole other story. But there is just a night and day difference between the indie and the traditional publishing world that I was not expecting nor prepared for, in that obviously, big publishers have funding and budgets to do stuff like promotion and do stuff like, ads and buying all that kind of stuff. They do have they have connections where all of a sudden, hey, you're being interviewed by the New York Times or USA Today or Entertainment Weekly, all of that kind of stuff. And that's just something you can prepare yourself for, especially when you're an introvert like I am. I am not a very good people person, but over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've trained myself to do stuff like this. Like even in 2019, maybe late 2018, the idea of doing something like this would have terrified the hell out of me. To talk to people I don't know and public speaking in any form. But one of the first events my publisher had me do pre-COVID, leading up to the release of The House in the Cerulean Sea, was all of a sudden they were like, okay, next week you need to drive to Pittsburgh because you're going to be speaking in front of a group of 300 librarians.
Oh, no.
So I was like, well, I guess my fear of public speaking will either die or it'll just become all I know and consume me. So
yeah,
I got up and managed to make through it. And now I just can't wait until we can all do this stuff in person so I can actually go out and speak to people, because my fear of public speaking is gone now. I don't even know what that is anymore, but I'm so excited for the world to open back up so we can do all this kind of stuff in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 300 librarians is definitely jumping into the deep end of the pool all at once. That'll do it.
Well, it showed the faith that my publisher had in me, but it also showed that they were kind of mean. Because like one of the first things that you do when you sign up with a new publisher is they go through and say, what are you and are you not comfortable with? And they have this whole list of stuff. And public speaking was one of the things at the very top that I said I was not very comfortable with, but I would try.
Oh.
And so now I'm just like, oh, there's going to be 10 people at a thing, no problem. Now there's going to be 1,000 people watching me talk. That's not a problem whatsoever. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me anymore, which I'm grateful for, but it's just one of those things.
Right. Yeah. No, it's it's good. It got easier with time, because I imagine with all the books, it's not going to stop. But public speaking can be very intimidating. Yeah, no, I did a thing once and people told me afterwards how good it sounded, but that they didn't realize was that I'd rehearsed it 50 times, word for word beforehand. But whatever works.
Yeah, some panels that I do, I'll get the questions beforehand and I will write out my answer to those questions right off the top of the bat, because one thing you have about ADHD, as I'm sure people watching know now, is that I have a tendency to ramble about pretty much everything. I love words, so I will say all the words.
Words are good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a few more minutes left. Did anyone else have any questions that they wanted to ask that they didn't get to? You can just go ahead and pop it in the chat if there is.
Rock on. You can do it. Any questions? You got like 10 minutes and I'll answer any question for them as long as it's nice.
Okay. Heard him. Any nice questions? What's your favorite color?
Questions that I can actually answer.
Yes.
If not, that's okay. I can totally just talk. I could talk about anything. Let me tell you. So let me tell you something real quick. So House in the Cerulean Sea, that came out last year in March, pre-pandemic, or right when the pandemic was kicking into gear. And it was, I've heard from many, many people that the House in the Cerulean Sea was the hug that they needed over the year of 2020.
Yeah.
And I get that. I totally understand it. And though I wish the world was had been in a much different place, the book came out when it was supposed to.
Mhm.
Under the Whispering Door, that comes out in September.
Mhm.
It is the second book in what I call my unofficial kindness trilogy, which The House in the Cerulean Sea is the first. Unofficial because they're not related. They're not set in the same world. They're not set in the same universe, but they both deal with the same themes. However, instead of being kind to others, Under the Whispering Door asks the question of, is it possible to be kind to yourself, and how hard that is. And if The House in the Cerulean Sea was the hug that we all needed, Under the Whispering Door is going to be the shoulder to cry on.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that, even though we're starting to reopen, and even though we're starting to get back to some semblance of normal, I don't think that we've processed the grief of the time that we've lost and the people we've lost in the last year, or the last 16 months, I should say. And I think that that's going to hit us all at once. And even though The House in the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door were written a couple of years ago, so obviously before I'd ever even heard the words COVID-19, there's something about the timing that's really strange, because again, The House in the Cerulean Sea was the hug, and then Under the Whispering Door is about the grief, the processing of the grief, and what it means to be kind, and what it means to be a good person, and if it's possible to change after a life of living a selfish life. And I am so excited for this book to come out, because it is a story of hope and love and loss and being a good person, which is something that I try to be every day. I don't know if I'll ever be a good person, but I try to be a better person.
Mhm.
And that's what I want people to look forward to with Under the Whispering Doors, is me talking through my characters about what it takes to be a better person. And it also is a queer love story too, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I already couldn't wait to read it, but I will absolutely be getting it the very second it comes out, because that sounds entirely up my alley. And it looks like everybody else in the chat agrees with that. We did have another question from Taryn, sort of related to things we were talking about, which is if you dealt with any imposter syndrome as a writer, and if so, how do you deal with, what tools do you use to deal with that?
All the time I deal with imposter syndrome. Look, when I was in January of this year, The House in the Cerulean Sea got onto the New York Times bestseller list for 5 weeks.
Wow.
And that was cool. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
thrilling. And then I started thinking, oh crap, is my publisher going to expect me to do that every time now?
Oh.
Are my readers that just came and found me with The House in the Cerulean Sea going to read my other books at that level too? You know, and then I started thinking about, what if the next books that I have written aren't as good as The House in the Cerulean Sea?
Oh, no.
They're not the same kind of story, because I don't write the same type of book over and over again. What if people who want to read, who love The House in the Cerulean Sea, are expecting the exact same story when Under the Whispering Door comes out? You know, and that freaked me out, because, you know, I think that I struggle still with the idea of success and what that is and what that looks like, or if it's something that I even need or want or deserve, I guess. But look, on the flip side of that, I worked my butt off to get here. I worked my butt off. I've through blood, sweat, and tears. I have done what I've done to get this far. And that is something to be celebrated. That is something that kind of accomplishment, I get to say that I've done something that not a lot of people have done. And a person, especially someone who's neurodiverse like I am, can be their own harshest critic. But as I've gotten older, I've learned to be less cynical and try to be easier on myself, because I'm not a perfect person. I'm going to make mistakes, but damn it, I deserve to celebrate my accomplishments. Yeah. I deserve that. And so yes, imposter syndrome, it doesn't matter if it's your first book or your 25th, because it is always going to be there. I can't tell you how many times I get freaked out when I'm getting ready to start something new and opening a blank Word doc and seeing that cursor just blinking at me. And I'm thinking, oh man, what if this story sucks? What if I can't get through this one? What if I can't do the right thing? And it's always going to be there. But as long as you don't allow it to take you over, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
And it's normal and healthy to have doubts, but so long as your doubts don't become all you know, you'll be okay.
Right. That's excellent advice.
And screw imposter syndrome too. Just write whatever you want to write, and don't let your doubts get in the way.
Awesome. Exactly. Another sort of I guess it varies depending on what you're looking for, but Lorraine was also asking which book of yours that you would recommend starting with out of all of them.
If you haven't read The House in the Cerulean Sea, I'd recommend going there because it seems like that's a good entryway. If you want something more decidedly adult, you could look at my Green Creek series. You can look at my Tales from Verania series. And I think those would be good places. Or if you want just over the top ridiculousness about queer superheroes, read The Extraordinaries and Flashfire when it comes out in July.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, they all look very good. I'm going through Murmuration right now myself.
That is one of the I love that book. that was my ode to the Twilight Zone and ode to Stephen King as my favorite writer. And I'm glad you brought that book up. That makes me happy to hear that mentioned.
Yeah, no, that's the vibe I was getting. I liked the, a little bit of unsettling. It's, soothingly weird.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the whole 1950s aesthetic that I have going on in that book. Yeah, I love that. That's so cool that you mentioned that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've only got about 5 minutes left. So if anyone has, actually, I missed one. Someone was asking if you're a part of any writing groups.
No, that's just a personal choice. Because I cannot write with other people around me. I cannot write, and I have 3 beta readers who I've worked with for years, who are the only people who read my stuff before anybody else. And it's just my own comfort levels and anything like that. Like writing groups, I've been invited to writing groups, and I know that some people swear by writing groups, but just for me and my own peace of mind, it's like why I can't go to like a coffee shop or anything and write, because I just get too distracted. I have to be at my desk staring at my computer, and that's it.
Yeah, I can see how it'd be. I know everyone works different, but yeah, in an outside setting, sometimes it helps people focus, and sometimes it's just distracting because there are too many things. But yeah. Okay. Well, if no one else.
Do you mind if I answer one more question?
Oh yeah,
I
go
saw
for
it
it.
in there. It says it's from when you revise. How do you go about it? Like, do you print it out or schedule time for it, or just go for it?
Oh, I missed that.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we got it. So
great.
I work, as I said earlier, I write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Fridays are days that I revise what I've written through the week. And so I focus on just what I've written through that week. So I'm not going back to revise the previous chapters. I'm not necessarily plotting ahead. I'm just revising on just what I've written. And for me, for revisions, it goes one of two. I do one of two things. I change the font on, because I have everything in Times New Roman. But when I'm revising, I change the font, and it's this weird little trick that somebody taught me, because it tricks your mind a little bit that you're reading something different. So when you're reading over your own words in the regular font, whatever you typed in, you tend to gloss over what you're writing. You tend to glaze over a little bit, and you might skip something or miss something. But if you change the font, it tricks your brain a little bit, and to catch things you might not have missed. Second thing I do is I read all dialogue out loud when I'm revising, because I want to write, no matter if a book is contemporary or fantastical, I want to write dialogue like actual people talk in real life. So I say my dialogue out loud to make sure that it sounds natural, like it sounds like it could be part of a conversation. You'd be surprised how many times when you're writing something that you might not catch how unnatural the flow is a little bit. So it always helps for me to read that dialogue out loud and when I revise, but that's just me. And then at the very end, when I finish a book, I will print the entire thing out. And when I go through revisions for a second draft, I will read and make marks on the papers themselves. Unfortunately, I'm killing a bunch of trees that way, but it's just something that's worked for me, and it helps me to stop staring at a screen for so long. And again, when your eyes start to glaze over, you might miss something.
Right. Oh no, those are excellent ideas. Very clever. Yeah, no, it looks like that's really helpful. Okay, well, thank you again so much for joining us today. And with the scheduling mishaps and everything, it's been really great talking to you. And I'm glad you were able to join our virtual hybrid con this year.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it. You guys have been wonderful, and we'll have to do this again soon, hopefully in person next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, come visit Maine anytime. There are libraries and conventions that we would all love to see you.
Oh yes, because I definitely still need to meet Stephen King. He's not getting any younger, so
yes, absolutely.
I'll have to do that. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
Bye. Bye. All right, well, thank you, everyone. That was great. I think they're stopping the recording if they haven't already. So see you later. Thanks for coming.